Hey, it's Matt, and I'm a school-based occupational therapist. And one of the things that my teachers bring up to me as a concern a lot of the time, especially with the younger students, is we have a lot of students that have difficulty tying a bow on their shoelaces. So I'd like to give you a few strategies to help with that skill and how to develop that skill today. First of all, um, it's often beneficial to have the student practice tying their shoes either on a practice board or by taking their shoe off and using it either on the table or on their lap. So I'm going to show you that today. So I've got one of my son's shoes here, and I'm going to just put it right on the table in front of me. So often it's beneficial to bring the shoelaces a little closer to the eyes and the hands so that we're not kind of bending over and trying to figure all of this out while bending over and getting it on to our own foot. So first thing is just get it up to the eye level, either on a tabletop or even just on the student's lap. Another thing is take a look at the shoelaces that you're trying to tie. Oftentimes flat laces are easier to tie than the round ones, but I've found with some students that the round laces are actually easier for them. So what I would say is you need to experiment with your student. Try tying some flat laces, try tying some round ones as well, and see which ones work best for your student. Another strategy is to try to choose one method of shoe tying and stick with it. So if you're going to learn one loop method of tying a bow, stick with it. If you're going to tie with 2 loops, stick with that. So choose a method that works for you. There's many out there on the internet. You can find lots and lots of great step-by-step tutorials on specific methods of tying the actual bow. But what I would recommend is choose a method and stick with it. You also might want to provide some visual supports and some consistent verbal cues as you choose that method and as you start to work on it. So it does help to take a picture at each step of the way in tying the bow, and then you can put some visuals together for your student to sort of cue those steps. It also really helps to make sure that the verbals that you're using with your student are very consistent so that you're using the same language and the same words over and over. One method that I found with learning to tie a bow, especially when it's very difficult at first, is a strategy called backwards chaining. And really what that means is that you would complete most of the steps of the task, and then the student would complete just the last step of the task to complete the very last step, or even the last 2 steps. You would tie the bow almost the entire way. Maybe you just have the student pull the loops at the end and tighten it up. And then as they get good with that, as they master that step, you would work your way backwards, and you would maybe have them complete the last 2 steps and then the last 3 steps. And you do that progressively until they're actually completing the entire task. Something else I've learned has helped with just manipulating shoelaces is to do lots and lots of lacing activities. So either take a hole puncher and find a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard and punch lots of holes along the edge, and then take a shoelace and lace up those holes. It really just helps the student to learn how to manipulate the laces with their hands and their fingertips, and just to get used to moving these strings around. Another thing, if you don't have a shoe that's handy, often in the therapy room, I don't want the kids to be taking their shoes off, so we'll just take a piece of cardboard or a practice board, punch a couple of holes in it. This is a really small one. You could use a bigger piece. Sometimes you just use a hole puncher and put a couple holes in a piece of cardboard and lace a couple of shoelaces right in there. And then we can practice shoelacing right here on the tabletop. Another thing I've learned is that it does help sometimes to use 2 different laces, or laces that are 2 different colors, rather, when they're first starting. I've also found that laces that are a little bit on the long side are easier at first when we're just working on the tabletop. Sometimes when we're pulling those loops through and we're finishing that bow, a common mistake is that students will pull so hard or their finger dexterity isn't great, so they kind of pull the loop all the way out, and then they get a little bit frustrated because the loops aren't there anymore. So if we work a little bit on the long side with our laces, we'll have plenty of leftover shoelace. And then we can progressively work towards shorter laces, or ones that are a little more standard and look like the ones that are on their shoes. So those are some simple strategies. Again, I didn't give you a specific method of tying a bow. You can find lots of resources online about that, but I would just really try some of these simple things that I showed you And really, practice is the name of the game. So some consistency with those verbal and those visual cues, lots and lots of practice, and lots of positive praise.